Alrighty, good day, everybody. My name is Tan. I'm here with Linkso, and we've got Tony again from Redwood Landscape. And we want to welcome Tony for another class. It's going to be a DIY hands-on class. So feel free to send all your questions in via chat, and we'll go ahead and get those answered. So Tony, the floor is all yours. Welcome again.
Well, thank you, Tan. Can I have the rest of this or just the floor?
Well, you can have the room.
Everything? Okay, good. Greetings, everyone. I don't know where you are, but wherever you are, I hope it's not scary hot or tornadoing or raining or flooding or lions and tigers and bears or anything else. That having been said, I'm Tony Morales. I'm founder and president of Redwood Landscape Incorporated. I'm a native San Franciscan and very pleased that I am. I was blessed to be here, and it's not hot, thank goodness, today. That having been said, let's talk about what's involved with any kind of a decomposed granite or pathway finds, patio or pathway. It's totally a DIY thing. I prefer you hire me to do it, but if you don't hire me to do it, it's something that can easily be done by you or your teenage boys who owe you favors. Some of this is backbreaking heavy manual labor, so take that in mind if you have physical limitations or concerns. You could hurt yourself and you want to be careful. Let me take a couple of minutes to start out by some of the basics of the things you need to think about or know before you even start your project, let alone go buy materials. Let's start with the design of your project. I want to spend a little bit of time, a brief amount, on thinking about the whole thing. That's great if you want to use this product and in whatever creative way you're going to come up with. But the basics of the design aspect of a DG pathway or a patio would be consider some important factors such as who's going to be using it is important. A play surface for children, not the greatest idea in the world. It's firm and quote unquote solid, but it's very gritty and grainy. Scratches and cuts and scrapes would happen for kids playing on a DG or a pathway fine path. You might not want to have that happen. So think about that as a criteria to consider when you start this material. Because it does have that gritty surface, another thing that can drive people nuts is if you do a DG patio or a pathway that goes up to your house, for example, or your ADU or some other area that the interior has a nice floor, a nice hard tile floor, a laminate floor, a wood floor. This stuff is very gritty and it can stick to the bottoms of socks and shoes and bare feet and dog paws. No sooner way to destroy your very expensive floor than go directly from a DG surface indoors. So bear that in mind. There are tricks you can pull if you decide you really have to have that patio going up to the door. Put several big welcome mats or surface that you could somehow clean your feet on, and then train the dog to do the same thing. But just to be forewarned, you can trash your floor with this kind of material, so watch out. DG is good for an awful lot of uses, but there are some that it's not so good for. One of them is in general, whether you're doing a pathway up and down a slope, for example. They look lovely and charming, but the reality is a decomposed granite, or I'm going to call it generically DG everything, even though some of it is pathway fines. DG pavement on a slope, in the rain, it can become very unhappy. The DG can shift and wash itself down. You may also get gullies carved into it. It is not a happy material on a slope where you have the water on the surface running over it. Even if there's a little bit of running, over time, it will erode it away and you'll have like a miniature effect of like a Grand Canyon. And that can be very undesirable for you. So it's something to consider. There are products that are called stabilizers generically, and I'm going to show you the use of several of those products and explain them in greater detail in a moment, that can be used to help bond, almost glue the surface of the DG together more. It's not glue, it's not like epoxy, it doesn't hold everything, so it'll tolerate anything, including a Cat 5 hurricane. It's not like that. It just helps to firm the surface a little bit, minimize picking it up and scraping it all up, or minimize it or slow it down anyway. But as far as water flowing over the surface of a stabilized DG surface, it's still going to trash it over time. So really think about that. Now, a DG patio or pathway, of course, should slope to a small degree for drainage purposes, just like with a patio of any material, concrete, tile, flagstone, whatever. You generally don't want it to sit literally level in every direction, or rainwater that gets on it doesn't really have anywhere to readily go. A gentle slope on a patio or pathway made of DG well, I mean, very gentle, like, for example, there are terms pertaining to slope and drainage, like an eighth of an inch per foot is commonly referred to, and or a quarter inch per foot. And all that means is that every horizontal foot that you travel on your patio, you have a 3 foot wide patio or pathway, there are 3 feet of travel, and at an 1/8 inch slope, you have 3 1/8 inch increments per 1/8 inch per foot. So after 3 feet, it would be 3/8 of an inch lower at one end than it would be at the other. Quarter inch is twice as much slope. So after, after 1 foot, it'd be a quarter inch lower at the downhill end than it would be at the uphill end. And you carry that thinking through for a large patio or any kind of a walkway, you'd like to have a certain degree of slope so that water doesn't tend to want to puddle and collect and stay there. Now, water can percolate through the DG and through the base rock that's underneath, which I'm gonna get to in a minute. But it's not like sand or where you, or, a sieve where you can just pour water and it flows right through. It doesn't work that way. But technically, the moisture does travel through to a degree. So if you get a puddle or an area where water seems to be a little bit more so sitting there than you'd like it to, in theory, over time, it's gonna finally soak in and go away. But you want to do the best you can to allow that surface water to exit while the rains are still falling, rather than having miniature lakes all over the place and dealing with them later. Bear in mind, this surface will flatten out and tamp down very firmly and very nicely, but it's not like concrete or asphalt or tile or brick or whatever else, that when it's solid and flat, it stays solid and flat. This stuff will still have an undulating surface, especially after it gets used and played on and walked on. It's never going to be perfect. And in the rain, you may notice areas that do quote unquote puddle more than other areas. And that just goes with the territory. And it'll drive you insane if you try to always build up where the puddle was and make it go away. It's hard to accomplish that. It's not a perfect building material. But for a casual patio or a casual pathway, zero problem. Comes in designer colors too. Well, maybe not designer colors, but it comes in several different colors as well. When you're designing your project, think about what colors you may be interested in using for this material. And that might be determined by the other things you're going to be putting around. Or if the patio or pathway is going to be near the house, for example, you may want to either, complement the color of the house, or at least find a color that doesn't conflict with it and look stupid having that blue patio, but you've got an orange house or whatever. Things for the designer potentially huge to think about. If you hire a designer, they should be thinking about the very same things, of course. And I'm going to get into the nuts and bolts. And we actually had a situation where my framework here had to get moved over on the floor after I had it all filled. So you're going to watch how Tony repairs things that got kind of screwy. Well, as part of our workshop, and it all really is part and parcel with working with these materials anyway. So you're going to get it. Usually I prefer to have it all fixed before you all see me. Oops. That having been said, the design aspect again, who's going to be using it, what purposes will it be getting used for, are important. Where it's going to be, like I said, slopes not so good. If you want to use a DG pathway going down a slope, I don't recommend making a sloping pathway that looks beautiful and charming going down the hill, because when it rains, you are likely to have some problems. And if you don't mind fixing the problems later, that's great. You might consider instead doing quasi steps, sections of the pathway that are reasonably flat, and then step it down to another section of pathway. So it's literally like big steps more than a continuous pathway on a slope. That can help you minimize the problems with erosion and stuff like that. And I dwell on the erosion thing a lot because it will happen if you support or welcome the circumstances that I've explained and you do it anyway. It's going to happen. There's no way to prevent that kind of erosion from happening, especially in some of the crazy rainstorms that have happened nationwide. So you've been warned. And that having been said, today we're going to use several different colors of DG, and they're over in the bags. Later on, I'm going to get out to putting them out and you can actually see them live and in person. But generally speaking, the DG and pathway fine products typically will come in shades of kind of a golden color. Oftentimes they're called gold fines or something to that effect, desert gold, etc. The yellowish golden color is a very common one. There can be shades of brown and tan that are often available. Sometimes it depends on what region you're in, what kind of product you can get. We're using one today called blue fines, which is it's light blue when it's dry and turns a very dark blue when it's wet. Unfortunately, I don't know the way to get that dark blue to stay that way. But I've used that in fact numerous times on jobs. And generally speaking, I prefer that color over the gold, frankly, because I'm a snob maybe, but the gold is a very commonly used color. You see it everywhere. And the blue is just something a little bit different. Of course, and again, it depends on the color palette of the rest of your landscape and or your house, or even the color of the plaster in the pool, DG near a pool, bad idea, but it can be done. The same reason the grit's going to get in the pool. sure, you've got filtration and all that kind of stuff, but maybe better not to introduce those bad elements into your pool or spa in the first place. Same thing with spas. Put a mat or a towel or something to wipe your feet on if you're in the DG first, or it will get you in the spa, and I'm sure you don't want to have it. Especially if it's a fiberglass spa, really, really bad idea. Okay, we've covered the who's going to use it and where it's going to go. If you were to put it in an area in the shade, for example, shade on DG coupled with the potential of moisture in any way, shape, or form, it could get mildewy or moldy over time. Not when it's newly installed, but an older DG patio, not uncommon at all to see moss or mildew growing on the top of it, especially if it's in a shade or a damp area. So that's something to consider as well regarding either put your DG in a different location or perhaps investigate using a different material instead of the DG, because those that will happen. It can get moldy and mildewy and you may not be happy about that. There are ways to fix that and deal with that. And the staff here at Linkso can guide you greatly about the various products to use or techniques to use, how to deal with that kind of stuff. So just again, you've been warned, but there are benefits compared to concrete pathways or flagstone patios, et cetera, this is always going to be cheaper. And that's one of the main reasons why I incorporate DG into my designs at times when I'm designing a project for a client who have a very strict budget or are very mindful of how much this is going to cost us. The DG tends to be cheaper than other types of paving materials. Yeah, the money thing oftentimes is a choice. I've actually designed patios and things using flagstone or other materials. And in the design process, the client has decided that the price for what that flagstone was going to cost, what else can we do? And the substitute of the DG is oftentimes a viable choice to try to save a few bucks. In fact, I did one time with a beautiful blue flagstone. The whole patio was supposed to be. We had to cut corners. We ended up ribbing the edge of the patio with the actual stone still and filled all the center of it with the blue fines. And it complemented the blue stones, and it actually looked very on purpose and looked great. They loved it. And they were warned about don't track the stuff in the house. Now, that having been said, let's pretend that we're going to go ahead and build a DG patio, or I'm going to sit back with my clipboard and tell you what to do, and you're going to do it. Wherever you're going to put the area, you're going to need to have space to physically fit the height of or the depth of all the material that you're going to be installing into that place. Two ways you can do that. You can excavate your ground surface down, take the dirt out, and dig it down to put all this stuff in, or you could potentially build it up and have edging that will hold everything that's above the surface of your adjacent ground. You can also split the difference and halfway sink it down and not have to remove or haul away or dispose of so much dirt. But either way, you're going to have a thickness of material being installed. Now, for a regular residential DG patio or pathway, I recommend the following products. You want to take notes, that's fine. Otherwise, you can certainly replay this later on. And yes, I do talk fast. I have a lot of ground to cover, and I try to make sure that you get everything that I have up in here before our time runs out. The first product is called base rock. Technically, it's called 3/4 inch class 2 base rock, but everybody generically calls it base rock. It is this stuff. And you'll notice it's starting to dry. Those lighter colored stones and things are just the chunks that have dried out already. It's dark because it's slightly damp right now. This is crushed up old concrete. It is being repurposed rather than stuck in a landfill somewhere. So that's a great idea to do that. It also makes it a little bit cheap. Well, it makes it cheaper than using actual stone, blasted out of a mountainside, for example. But that's a 3/4 inch base rock. Now, let's assume that you're doing a pathway or patio in a residential setting. You're not going to drive a car on it or a golf cart or whatever. I recommend a 4-inch thick layer, 4-inch compacted down, when it's all packed down layer of the base rock that's going to be underneath the other products that are going to go on top of it. Before you put your base rock down, you'll notice this black material, this black cloth that's going all the way around the edges of my installation here. That's called, well, there are a lot of different terms for it, but I call it filter fabric. Some people call it geotextile. And what it is, it's like heavy felt. It's very, very strong. When they build highways and roadways and sidewalks and whatever, they put this stuff down on top of the dirt before they put the gravel and the concrete and the asphalt and whatever. And I highly recommend that you do that if you want to have a successful project that will last as long as it's humanly possible to last. The purpose of that product is twofold, or actually manyfold. First and foremost, it keeps the material segregated. Let's assume you have a yard that has clay, for example. The clay, dries like concrete and shrinks and cracks in the summertime, and it swells up and gets squishy, wet, and slimy in the wintertime. Well, if this was all on top of clay when it was in the wintertime and wet and damp, it is possible over time for the base rock materials to try to squish into the softer damp clay. It can happen. This material makes that impossible. They're always segregated. And you will always have your important layers are kept away from the dirt, which is not desirable to have mixed in with all this stuff. The filter fabric also is a permeable. Air and water can pass through it. In fact, if I had a piece and held it up like this and poured water on it.
Right behind you, Tony.
Pardon?
Right there.
Oh, this?
Yeah.
This is filter. There's no more Tony. Here it is. This comes in gigantic rolls, and Linkso can cut off from the roll and give you a piece of whatever size you want. Otherwise, you can buy thousands of square feet in a gigantic roll that's very heavy. But it's not hard to work with. It's just like felt. Cut it with scissors. Use a crummy pair of scissors that you don't ever want to use for cutting fine things again, because it'll be kind of screwed up. But absolutely use that. Put it on the ground after you've dug everything up. And it keeps the material segregated. It allows rainwater to continue to pass through. It allows air to pass through. So any plant roots or tree roots that could be down there, you're not suffocating them or drowning them or anything like that. It's all good. This is not weed block fabric. It will not block weeds. I learned this the hard way many years ago in my career. And I did a project where that wasn't well thought out, actually. And it's terrible for weed block, but it's great for reinforcing pavement and things you construct. So you've been warned. If you're going to be trying to minimize weed growth through the material, there are heavy duty weed block fabrics, and Linkso sells a good weed block fabric as well that could be used instead of this material. Just FYI. But again, we assume we've dug our hole out. When you dig the hole out or the trench out or whatever area to put the stuff in, the soil underneath should be packed down very firmly. If it's all, you dug it out way too deep and you kind of raked around and have nice, loose, soft, wonderful soil underneath, it needs to be packed down solidly before you put all of this, or things are going to settle. And when they settle, they may not settle at a uniform rate throughout the whole thing. You may have one area where, wow, that one side sure settled a lot, and all this stuff dropped down to settle with it, and the other side didn't do it so much, and now everything's all screwy. So it's important that, like painting your house, it's not how expensive the paint is, it's not what color, it's not what brand it is, it's the prep that was underneath the paint that makes the difference between a good, long-lasting paint job or not. The scraping, the sanding, the priming, the whatever. It's the same thing with this. It's what's underneath is key to having what's put on top last as long as possible and perform to the best of its abilities. But if you do a poor job underneath it, you're going to end up with a very unhappy finished result later on down the road. And you spend bucks doing this and a lot of hours of sweat and hopefully no blood and maybe a few tears. So this is why I'm really stressing what's underneath to make it right first. The dirt needs to be packed down firmly before you put the cloth on it. There are ways to tamp dirt, and there are ways to pack down and tamp the base rock and the TG, and we're going to kind of cover that now as well. Follow me, right? Now you don't have to follow me. I don't think the camera goes over here. Does it, camera?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. This is a garden variety, pun intended, sod roller. You can rent them at rental yards. You can buy one for yourself if you wish. So for sod lawns, this is what I use to pack down the ground, tamp down the grass and get it in good contact with the soil. It just happens that it's great for compacting stuff like this. This is empty right now. It only weighs, I don't know, 50 or 60 pounds. You fill it with water and it then is very effective at packing things down because it's 300 pounds now and really heavy and a pain in the neck to drag around, but it works. So you could get your dirt all prepped, get it all raked smooth the way you want it. You could take this most likely if you only have a thin layer of loose dirt, roll it around big time and pack everything down and go in perpendicular directions to really make sure it's packed down firm. You can also pack with other devices, and I'm going to show you that it's still very important. Sod roller is great. It's convenient if you can use it. It's a lot easier than tamping by hand. Where did I put my tamper? Yeah, I put my tamper. Oh, there it is. Okay, this is a hand tamper. These can also be rented or purchased. This one weighs, I don't know, 20 pounds maybe or so. As you notice, it's got a very flat surface. This is cast iron or steel and a wooden handle. Some of them come with fiberglass handles. The tamper is designed, I'm really not ready to tamp things, but I'll tamp, I can tamp them here. And I'm just going to show you quickly. The tamper is used to pack down surfaces, whether it's dirt or rock or gravel or whatever. And they're very good at doing it. And you literally pick it up and down, you pick it up and down, you go like this with it. You go back and forth and back and forth. I haven't finished this area yet, so this is premature. But follow, just work with me. Notice that I'm holding it in a particular way. Notice that I'm holding the base of it flat compared to the surface of the ground, not slanted and screwy and weird. It's very important that you keep it flat, or parallel to the surface you're trying to tamp down, or it will not tamp very effectively at all. It'll do a terrible job. In fact, it could hurt you. You don't want to do that. Speaking of the hurting you, but you get the idea. You tamp back and forth, back and you keep doing it until it doesn't seem to want you squished down anymore, frankly. You can also listen to it, at least I listen to it, and I can hear when it's finally solidly packed down as opposed to almost there but not quite finished. And it really does make a different sound that the mic probably won't pick up anyway. But the point being, now this is all tamped firmly. You can tamp the dirt that's underneath that way. You can tamp the base rock before we put the DG on top the very same way. And you can tamp the DG that way as well. So there are 3 different ways by hand to do it. You have a big area, you're going to have arms like King Kong when you're done. So that having been said, the roller is better for big areas. The hand tampers are great, especially for edges and curves and corners. The big roller, for example, couldn't do the corners. You got to get in there and hand tamp those most likely. There's a machine you can rent at any equipment rental yard called a vibratory plate compactor. The rental people will call it a Vibe plate. It's this big machine that has a big flat plate on the bottom of it. You fire it up and the plate vibrates like crazy. This is a powerful machine and heavy, and you don't want to run it over your feet. But it is very good at tamping things down very firmly, the bare dirt, the base rock, even over the surface of the DG. But I tend to advise try a different way first, because it's a big heavy device, and if you have your DG all raked out nice and smooth, and this is supposed to be the final surface of your pathway or patio, the tampers, you try turning them and moving them around, you got to go back and forth and back and forth. It screws up the surface when you make turns. It's kind of a pain in the neck, really, but it does compact very, very well. But you're going to have a lot of touch up and fixing of where the machine made dents or divots, or you made a turn and it gouged. It's kind of a pain in the neck, really. So I try to avoid using them when possible, and I use the roller instead. It's far kinder and gentler to the finished surface of what you're trying to produce here. I'm going to go backwards now for just a split second, because I was talking about you want to run over your foot with the tamper. You don't want to tamp your foot with this thing either. And that one over there, I've run over my foot before, but I have steel toe boots, so it doesn't hurt me. But still, that could be an owie, and you don't want that to happen. Please dress appropriately when you do this kind of stuff. Notice how I'm dressed. I don't do this to be stylish, believe me. And I've got my steel toe boots, you can see, because they're all worn down to the steel all the time. Very, very important. Knee pads are going to be needed, because, even if you have tough knees, it's only soft dirt, blah, blah, blah. It only takes one rock that you've knelt on, or one rusty piece of a nail that was dropped into the dirt 50 years before you moved into your house. It only takes one to really ruin your day. ER see this stuff all the time. So you want to protect yourself. Knee pads, gloves are a very good idea. If not, you'll have, Marlboro man hands. But gloves are important too for the same reasons. But a lot of people don't think about, they say lift with your legs, not, lift your legs, not your back. Very important. There are heavy things here. Please don't screw up your back. A lot of people don't think at all about the fact that you're in the sun. Even if it's a foggy day in San Francisco, you get sunburned through the fog. You got to protect yourself as far as the sun is concerned, whether you use sunblock properly, or you wear long sleeves, etc. Wear a big broad brimmed hat, all those various things. Protect yourself in whatever way you see fit that's effective proper protection, because you're going to be out in the sunlight even if it isn't a sunny day. It's important. I know people who have skin cancer because they've got too much sun. You can't undo it once you get it, so it's a good idea to be preventive. That having been said, if you wear a big floppy hat and you're down there in the ground working or doing whatever, put sunblock on your face anyway, even if it's a cosmetic with sunblock in it, and chapstick too with sunblock in it, please. Sunlight reflects off the dirt. Even if you've got your hat and it's making shade on you, it's coming up from down below and getting you anyway, just at a slower pace. So really be careful about that kind of stuff. I recommend steel-toed boots. You spend a little bit more. Regular boots is still a whole lot better than nothing. Do not, please do not wear sports sandals. Do not wear flip-flops. And really, tennis shoes or sneakers are a bad idea. But I've seen all these things being done before. Really, really horrible idea. Boots are better. Even if you buy a cheap pair of boots, you have more protection than those wonderful flip-flops that you were going to wear, or your slippers, or whatever. Don't do it. Really, don't do it. That's my lecture about safety. It's really, really important. A lot of ways to hurt yourself, and I don't want you to do it. There are better ways to spend your time. So moving right along, Tony, let's talk about building this thing again, shall we? That's a good idea. Okay, we've got the cloth down. We've let's pretend we're doing a walkway right now. We've dug looks like a broad trench, X number of inches deep. The depth of your digging, again, you decide, is the whole thing gonna look like it's, in the ground level kind of? Is it gonna look above the ground or half and half? And that will determine how much digging do you do, how deep do you go. The total depth that will be necessary, or the total height of your edging that will be necessary. This is temporary, this is just theater. So I just got 2x4 Doug fir edging. Don't use Douglas fir for lumber edging outside. It will not last very long at all. It's worm food and termite food and bug food and mold and mildew food and rock food. It just will go, and it'll never last. Don't do it. But anyway, you're gonna have 4 inches of base rock, as I mentioned before. You can put more than that. There's no harm in doing that. There's just more work involved and more costs, but there's nothing wrong with putting a thicker layer. Just never put less than 4. That's my advice to anyone. Consider that your minimum for anything. And it's not because you're going to be putting something heavy on top, like, oh my God, it's just, us sitting in our lawn chairs, but it's again, providing a stable base for the DG to sit on. And I want to have a base, or I want you to have a base that isn't going to move around. Like we were talking about why the dirt needs to be packed down and why the dirt needs to be segregated from the base rock, is to have that stable foundation upon which you're building the rest of this. And the base rock is certainly part of the foundation in all this. A thinner layer of base rock doesn't really form, in my opinion, a solid compacted base or a pad that can support what's going on top of it without potentially having the possibility for shifting and moving in some way, shape, or form. Even if you pack it all together, still it's crushed rock and dust. It's technically flexible. So a thinner layer, sure, it's going to save you a couple of bucks, but it could cause a greater likelihood or possibility of problems down the road because the surface underneath was not as solid and happy and stable as we had wanted it to be. Just put the 4 inches or more, and you'll be fine unless you live in a particular anomaly or some strange situation regarding soil or seismic activity or underground water, for example. There are circumstances that require other ways to approach this than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your garden variety garden installation. So we're going to have our base rock all tamped down. In fact, I'll quickly tamp this for you. I actually hadn't finished screening it out where I wanted it to be, but in the interest of moving things along, you've already figured out Tony's going to talk anyway, but he's going to this is not the way to do things. I will show you. Heck, I'll show you on this one as long as it's on the camera. There are several different ways to how do you scrape it all out and how do you get it the way you want it. This is super teeny tiny to be having 4 different kinds of DG all in one. In the real world, I doubt you'd be doing it like this, but so I don't have my screen board yet built, but I'm going to show you in general what the principle of all that is. Oh, pardon me for a moment. I got to go off camera. The guys move my boards. I'm back. Oh, please be long enough. Woo, we're long enough. Okay. I'm not going to use the screen board, but I'm going to show you how I cheat. I told you earlier I had to cheat to try to fix all this because it got moved around. Let's assume you're going to use wood edging. I'll talk about edging in a greater detail in a moment. But let's assume you have whatever kind of wooden edging you're going to use. That having been said, you have your 4 inches of base rock. Well, that's great, Tony, but how much space do we need to allow for the DG that's going to go on top of it? Another very good question. I recommend no thinner of a layer of DG or pathway fines. Always put 1.5 inches thick or even thicker than that. You don't have to put 3 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches. You're just throwing money away doing that. If you have a stable base underneath, 1.5 inches is going to be just right. So I recommend that. But that having been said, there's a regular garden stake you can buy just about anywhere. They tend to be 3/4 of an inch thick by 1.5 inches the other way. So there's your 1.5 inches, and there's half of your 1.5 inches. Anyway, what you want to do with the base rock is you don't want to fill it all the way up to the top and then try to pack it down. You will not pack down enough to get your 1.5 inches of space to fit this material. So you have to start out by spreading it all around below the top of your edging to allow the space for this material to fit. As a general rule, what I would suggest is you scrape it all around. I'm doing this. This isn't the way you would do it because it's so tiny and I'm cheating. Just bear with me. I know I'll get calls and letters and whatever, but just bear with me that I'm not doing it the way that's ideal. But I want to show you what it ends up looking like once it's all ready to go. Now, when I tamp this down, I already know how much it's going to sink down. It'll probably squish down 3/4 of an inch to an inch when you pack it all down and it settles. So I'm using the 3/4 inch side of my board again because I'm cheating. And it's really as simple as you run it along the edge of the edging. I put my finger on the top so I can feel, and I've got it. So, it's 3/4 of an inch down. We put it all through like that. When I go to tamp it, in theory, it should end up about 1.5 inches below the wood. So I'm going to very, very quickly do that. And let's find out if Tony just made a moron of itself by not even getting it close, or at least was sort of in the ballpark. Generally speaking, I should be in the ballpark. With your with your base rock, in a perfect world, your base rock should be slightly damp. Like this is slightly damp. It doesn't stick together when I crush it, but it's certainly got a degree of moisture in it. Soggy and squishy is bad, but the base rock packs together better. It compacts better and more reliably and more firmly if it's slightly damp. If it's dry and dusty, really, you could be better off dampening it down overnight and come back the following morning to pack it down. Fortunately for me, the folks at Linkso, I guess they pre-moistened it for me or something because it's all ready to go. Sometimes I get really dry batches because it's been sitting out in the sun for a long time. Sometimes not. This one was damp. I'll show you a couple of tools that you're going to use for your big patio or big walkway. And yes, I know I'm not wearing my gloves. I know. But you should wear your gloves. My hands are somewhat accustomed to this. And I have thick skin on my hands compared to the average person. But it's a really good idea. Otherwise, you're going to be all scraped up and unhappy. And your hands will be dry, dry, dry. This stuff just sucks the moisture out of your skin. So consider that as well. But I already know what I'm doing tomorrow, same kind of work as I'm doing today. So, well, actually, no, I'm not. It's Saturday. Tomorrow's Thursday. Crap. And then golly, yes, I do have to do this tomorrow. All right, this is approximately 3/4 of an inch on top of it. And again, I will show you the proper way of doing this in a moment, but I wanted to show you the tamping and how much this tends to squish down when you tamp it. That was the whole point of this exercise. When you're using the tamper, good idea not to bend over. Again, you want to try to protect your back as much as humanly possible. You notice that, tamp out a nice little square pattern on the device. Oops, hitting the wood is less effective. Now, once I've done that tamp down, I shift half the width of the tamper over and do it all over again. The reality is it's not possible to over tamp it, so I always overlap my rows of tamping. I feel like there's a much more thorough tamping job. It's much more uniformly squished down everywhere, rather than doing a row and then doing the next row and in between maybe didn't get tamped as much. It could get weird, and I prefer uniformity. If you like a finished surface of your patio, it'll always look uniformly nice. So that's what you do. You go back and forth until you can feel it's no longer squishing down. And as I said, I can detect the sound of it when it's finally gotten that way. And you just keep doing it. If you're using the vibratory plate compactor or you're using the roller, it's back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until it doesn't seem like it's going down any farther. It'll be multiple passes to finally get it that way. But with the hand tamper, it's like I said, by feel and by the sound of it. Overlapping, even if you use the larger devices, don't do a row and then go over and do the next row next to the one you just did. Always overlap by half of a row. So you're constantly doing it twice as much as you thought you might need to, but twice as much is good. I'm going to not talk for a moment because you probably can't hear me tamping noise anyway, so hang on. We are reasonably tapped out. Now, same thing with the big machines. You'll know it when you've gone through it. Just keep driving or rolling over it, and it won't go down any farther. Really, that's it. Let me check really quickly here. How far down did it go? In a perfect world, this is 1.5 inches. I'd like it to have settled down that much. If it hasn't, the reality is tamp it some more, and it will. I'm going by feel, and I am 1/8 of an inch not down enough yet. So seat of the pants, we're really in the zone, and the reality is that 1/8 of an inch is going to break you or make your project either way. If you're that close, you're close enough. I could go back through and sample living heck out of it, and probably get it to go down that 1/8 inch. It almost really doesn't matter. That's basically ready for the PG product to go on top of it. Do I want to show you that right now? Well, I have to do the whole thing, so I can show you the 4 different colors. Yeah, why don't we do one? We'll put that, this is the blue fine, so I haven't finished fixing, but you notice it's really light colored when it's dry. Actually, when it came out of the bag, it was pretty light colored. Let's do a different color then, shall we?
The popular taffy or the sunset gold.
Yeah, let's do this one. This is,
Taffy.
yeah, I was thinking, that's not the gold. Okay. Now, you're gonna need lots of the material, most likely, unless you're doing a tiny little space. Here's the deal, this is real stone. This bag's about 100 pounds. If you're not comfortable with safely lifting 100 pounds out, throwing yourself into the ER, don't do it. It really isn't. And yes, if you look at the color of my hair, it's like, Tony, you're old. You shouldn't do that either. I'm not as old as I look. Well, I don't even know that I look old. But the exercise is also, it's a great workout. I get paid to work out. That's what I joke in and tell you. But it really is 100 pounds. You don't want to just take for granted that, wow, that was super easy. Because it can hurt you. Your gardener will love you when you're done, but it can hate you during the process of actually putting the stuff out and dealing with it. Tools you're going to need. I still say you're going to need the hand tamper, even if you use the roller or rent the bike blade, you're still going to need this. And again, you can rent them. I don't remember what this cost because I bought it 40 years ago or 35 years ago. I just don't know. Fortunately, I haven't lost it. Tools you're going to need. You're going to need a flat shovel, which I've hidden over here cleverly. I don't care if it's a good quality one or a cheapo one, it really doesn't matter, but make sure it has a nice smooth edge to it. It comes in very handy for dealing with all these kinds of things. And it doesn't have to be a pointed rounded off shovel, because we're not, digging holes in the ground or anything, we're just taking loose material and spreading it around. Or some version of spreading it around. Yeah. In theory, it had previously worked out that I took the hair under a full bag to fill these squares. It looks like I definitely have a surplus. That bag might have been fuller. There's no harm in having a little too much. You should have a little left over. The staff at Linkso can help you with computing how much do you need for a given size space. It's basic math, otherwise the square footages and all that kind of stuff. But and again, I refer back to, if I was working with you, I can totally help you with all that kind of stuff. To convert different products way differently, sometimes with the amount you get for a different certain price can differ. Some products are sold by the cubic yard, but oftentimes they're sold by the ton. And that's back to how much does that product actually weigh compared to how much space it takes to achieve that weight. But yeah, I got too much in there. Guess what? I'm going to carefully put it into a nice neat pile on the side of the pavement here because I don't have time to fill the bag. But you will need some extra when you're doing this project. I don't know how much is some because I don't know how big your project is going to be. Clearly, I have enough for this little heavy project I'm doing. I will show you how to screed this as well. And I'll elaborate on the topic of screening in just a moment when I actually have this out to start looking like something rather than just a disaster like it looks like right now. But you see, a flat shovel thing can come in very handy for all kinds of purposes, such as this. If you're doing squares and rectangles, you got to make sure that the corners get filled adequately as well. Oftentimes the corners end up not quite getting as much as anywhere else, and that's unfair to the corners. We should not discriminate against the corners. I'm assuming that when you do your garden, you're probably really not going to have 4 different colors in close proximity. Because as you can see, Tony went and did a major faux pas. He's already got the gold on top of the blue. Not a good idea. Unless you're really going for a wild color scheme. Sure, I guess why not? Okay, that's roughly spread out. The things that I'm trying to explain to you, rather than using, Tony's cheating just to get everything fixed techniques, are things you would use in real world, real time in your larger pathway or patio, not this little dinky stuff. How much time do we have, Kim? Roughly?
An hour and 15 minutes.
Thank you. Okay.
We got plenty of time.
Yeah, we have plenty of time. All right, this is.
Always. Make more.
And do I want to, I don't want to show you how to make a screen board. A screen board is basically the product screening is it's used also for, I've seen it used in setting tile, I've seen it used for various things, but out in the garden, you use screen boards a lot. It's essentially picture like our edging. You've got an edging all the way around. It doesn't matter if it's metal or brick or stone or wood or whatever. And you want to fill an area in and have it even all the way through. You take what would be called a screen board, typically a 2x4, such as this. It can be a different size of lumber, it doesn't really matter. But you literally drag it across the surface, it contacts the edges and you drag it across and it spreads around the material. So it fills in the low spots, it shaves down the high spot. And in theory, all is right with the world regarding how much is in the hole. Like I'm just dragging across right now and you may not be able to pick it up, but the board suggests that right along this edge here is a little bit low. Not a lot, just a little bit. So this is your easiest and best opportunity to try to get things a little more even, rather than after the fact, try to fix things. Fixing things after the fact, goes into territory. There's going to be areas of like, oh man, I tamped it all down, that one spot was low. It just happens. And that's why you have some extra material. This is easy to screen right now because it's not a big area, so it's not heavy. A bigger area, you're going to have 2 people. If this was, 6 feet longer or whatever, somebody at the other end with that big long board, the 2 of you have to work it. A try. There's no way you can do it by yourself. I've tried, trust me. By yourself can get done, but it's beyond crazy to even try. If you need to fill in low spots, put some of the material ahead of the board that you're going to drag, and as you drag it, it'll keep pushing the extra, and it'll let what's needed just drop down into the space underneath. So it ends up being relatively perfectly, and that's the goal of this exercise, is to basically have enough in the spot. Too much, not so good. One thing I'll say about this is real scientific looking, isn't it? But you get the general principle. You can also just screen board in the other direction. You've got a longer board, you can run it in a slant. I chose to take the easy route and use the short board. I have a longer board, but it'd be kind of overkill for this. But you get the idea. Now it's relatively even. I prefer that before you go tamping things, that you, not necessarily with your hand, but you see where the inside edge of your edging is. When the stuff's all over the top, you can't quite see it. And that makes it harder to aim the tamper where it needed to be. I've just found. And I guess I'm breaking my rules about the glove thing. I know. Pretend that I have gloves. Okay, so that's essentially ready for camping. Now, I'm really jumping around this a little bit. However, there's not a however to it. Tamping would be the next stage for this particular material. I tamped this once before, but I have to finish fixing it before I can tamp it again. So I'll show you that. But if you were using stabilizing products, and this is really jumping the gun, bringing this conversation in early, but the tamping thing can revolve around the timing of when do you do it, if you're going to stabilize your material or have material that's got stabilizer mixed into it. There are basically 2 different types of stabilizing techniques. And again, the stabilizer is like glue, gluing the surface together, but it's not as strong as glue. It really doesn't just stick it all together and it's that way forever, but it does bond things together, not just the surface, but what's underneath. It makes it a little bit more of a cohesive unit rather than a whole bunch of loose stuff that just happens to be squished together right now. And that is a desirable thing to have. It will help to maintain the surface or preserve the surface of your patio. I already warned you about rainwater running over it. That having been said, the ways that the stabilizers are used is different, and that's why I'm bringing it up right now. Up on the table here, you see the big bag says stabilizer. It's a powder. It's mixed into the DG. How much do you mix and all that? The directions are there, and I would say Lingso can comment on that one. You can also get the DG from Lingso delivered to you with the stabilizer already mixed in it. That is super convenient. I really recommend if you're going to use that product, let them do it. It's ready to go when they drop it off of their truck. It's not like glue that's drying the minute that it goes out to the air. It doesn't work that way. So that product you would get pre-mixed in your DG. You bring it on out, you put it all out like I just did, and it's got the product in it. It can get sticky on your hands and all that, and Tony would be complaining about his hands being all sticky because of no gloves. But it's not going to poison you to death. It's not going to kill the dog. It's all fine. But it's ready to go. You spread it all out. And what we would do for this, I I'll just show you. I'll tamp it all down. You spread it all out. The DG with the product mixed into it, sorry. Tamp it again. And you're no stranger to the tamping subject because we did that just shortly ago. Now, I was tamping 4 inches of base rock before. Took more tamping to get that thicker layer. So all squished down and become cohesive and solid. We only have an 1.5 inch layer here, so it is easier and faster to tamp it all together. And yes, I know that you've heard me say, but Tony, the base rock is best if it's slightly damp. Yes, that's true. In a perfect world, the DG would also be damp. However, in reality, I've not seen any big deal breaker problem. If it's dry and you put it out and you tamp it, it's a very thin layer and it's going to get watered in at some point or another. And the water will also help to settle everything together and make it all happy, frankly. So, but it's still the same thing. Tamping back and forth, feel it tamping. You will hear it most likely when consistency has changed from being loose and fluffy to being more solidly stuck together again, which is what you want it to be. And always overlap your rows, just like I said. No harm in tamping it too much, as I said before. You can overlap your rows by 1/4, by 1/3, by 1/2, doesn't matter, as long as you're multiple tamping. When it's dry like this and you tamp, you may notice the surface all around it. You see it kind of squish out and puff out and move around, and it just goes with the territory. Make sure you cover that and tamp it again. And by the time we get to the end, it'll be almost ready to call this one finished. And put you that much closer to being able to actually, bring out the solo cups and some adult beverages or something and some chips and guac and have a party. But again, when you're tamping, regardless of what device you use, you need to make sure you're solidly and effectively tamped all the way to the edging, not just close enough. You need to get it right and get it all the way out. And that's why I said you must have one of these when you buy it or rent it. Even if you use those devices, which are great, they don't have a lot of finesse. They don't have a lot of I don't know, accuracy, I guess. They end up having to still don't get the edges and get them all just right. All right, for all intents and purposes, that really is tamped all down. Now, originally, I was going to show you how to do this next thing, but the reality is I can tell you, and I think you could probably figure it out. Now, remember, this, hypothetically, this has the bonding agent mixed in with it already, that powder. You can't see it really, you can't really tell when you're using it, other than you can get sticky if you start handling it. But it's all out, it's all ready to go. You've got this all tamped out and the surface looks good to you. I would suggest clean off all around the edges, sweep around the edges. If you have some on the adjacent pavement, for example, whatever, get it off of there before you do this next step. Take a garden hose. Don't have to turn it on full blast. You want to put a light, gentle but a light, gentle spray of water. You don't want to gouge it. You don't want to spray it, splash it, and do all kinds of things, but you want to gently dampen it so that the water will soak in. And the water needs to soak in through that whole 1.5 inch thick layer, not just the very top. So you water it until it can't take it anymore, but you don't water it to the point of washing things around. You don't want to water it to the point of great big puddles. It's almost a matter of spray it lightly, let it soak in, spray it lightly, let it soak in, spray it lightly, add, the lather, rinse, repeat until it won't take it in any longer, really. This can take some time, especially for a big area. It could drive you crazy how long it takes, but you're activating the bonding agent, or binding agent, I should say. So you're setting off that glue now and making it do its thing. But you want to have all of the glue through that whole layer get wet, so all of it is sticking together. Otherwise, if you only do a little bit and you get tired of hosing it down or watering it down and leave, it may not get all the way through and you've only glued together a thinner portion of it. You really want to get it to go through all of it. And this does not drain like a sieve. Water doesn't just zoom through it. It takes a while, but gravity works and the moisture will wick through all of the material. And if you do all that, you will have a fully stabilized, fully functional, very happy DG patio or pathway using that particular product, using these techniques. I cautioned you about sweep off all around beforehand. You could get staining from the bonding agent on adjacent surfaces. Possibly, it doesn't always happen. No guarantee it will happen, but you don't want to take a chance on it happening and then having to find the proper product and or way to get that haze or that staining off of your other surfaces. That's why I say the best thing to do is clean the heck out of all the areas around it and don't over water it so that it's puddling up and running out with slightly colored water getting onto other surfaces, because that slightly colored is exactly the thing that's going to cause hazing or whatever on your other surfaces. So you want to prevent that rather than watching another seminar about how to clean the stuff off of your pavement, or talking to the folks at Wingsoak who can help you, how do I clean up the mess that I just created? It can be done. But why create the mess? You're better off just sitting in your lawn chair and enjoying it. Speaking of lawn chairs on DG are just fine. Stabilized product it's a firmer product. It will tolerate the feet of your lawn chair or whatnot on it better, or tables or whatever. You can put lawn furniture and garden furniture and patio furniture on your DG and know it's not going to sink in the rain. If it's properly built and you built a proper base underneath and you segregated everything from the dirt underneath, it will be solid. Not only solid like it's made of concrete, but it will be solid and stable. You can put furniture on it. Lift your furniture to move it around. If you drag it, guess what you're going to do? But beyond that, it really is a viable material. It's great to use. And as I said, it saves bucks compared to other materials. We have other colors in here. I'm gonna talk you through some of that while I'm. Give me a 15 seconds to work in my head. How do I repair the things that got kind of screwed up before? And then I will talk to you about edging while I'm actually doing some of this other stuff, using my cheating technique with my one little board, rather than building a screed board and doing it all in this stupid little spot. It's not the best use of my time right at the moment. But the screed board thing, I will more explain to you one of the little details about it when you go build your own screed boards, that you can get it dialed in exactly where you want it to be, and you and your helper drag things along and get the low spots filled and shave off the high spots, and it will be ready to go if you make your screed boards properly. And I'll show you in just a moment about that one. First, I gotta get some more blue fines because this needs a little bit more. So that having been said, let's get a shovel and let's get some blue fines. I'm not carrying the bag over because I told you it's heavy. I only need a little bit, so I'm just going to scoop some. Canvas, we've got the taffy, we've got the desert gold. What is the gray? Is it just gray?
So the one that you're working is blue fines, that one's taffy, and we've got the sunset gold path fines and black basalt fines.
Black basalt, okay.
Black basalt,
Okay.
yeah.
Black basalt is a very cool material, and yes, it is a type of stone called basalt. You can get it in cobblestone, you can get it crushed, you can get it all kinds of different ways. It's another one, when it's dark, when it's wet, it's a much darker color than when it's dry. And that certainly is the case with the blue fines here too. In fact, I've got my sprayer for the other stabilizing product. You spray it on to your freshly installed EG, and I will probably just take a little water, squirt it on there anyway, just to maybe I'll put the stabilizer on that to show you what it looks like when it's dark. I don't know of a good way to keep it looking dark other than constantly watering it. That's not a good idea. All right, as you can see, we're almost there. Oh, one of the things about the stabilized DG products is what happens if my patio gets damaged somehow? What do? Because it's all been glued together. The good news is these products you could scarify them. But let's pretend that there's a gouge in here, the rainwater washed it away, or somebody dropped a bowling ball in there and messed it all up. You can scrape with a rake or a shovel, or you can get a hammer, bust it all up again, soften it all up again. Put it all out like we've discussed. You can make that patch and then reseal it. Now, the product with the powder, of course, you're going to have to scrape it all up and mix powder into it, or go to Link, so just buy a bag or bags if it's a small patch, and bring that pre-mixed material and put it in just like what we've been talking about elsewhere. But it is repairable, which is a good thing because damage happens sometimes. And in Belmont right at the moment that had that issue. That it was not installed properly in one area and it's failed, but the rest of the patio is fine. They're like, well, Tony, now what do we do? The product that was used to stabilize their patio is not repairable. So I got to take out a portion of it and fix that portion with the proper products. And I've already told them there's a slight possibility that the color match may not be ideal, even if it's the same type of DG product that I'm putting in, because the stabilizer is different. It's possible to be a slightly different color. I don't think it's going to be the end of the world for them, but I just had to warn them because it could very well happen. And that's just, it just goes with the territory sometimes, unfortunately. This is not scientific at all. I'm just trying to get some of the gold out of there because that was not the way to do it. It's kind of silly to me to even let that happen. What was I thinking? Meanwhile, back on the farm, it's man, I should have. Okay, here we go. Again, I don't usually do my workshop where I'm repairing a great deal of what I'm trying to teach you. I just have it as if it's, a clean site and we're off to the races doing it as a new install. So I guess you're learning some more techniques too. 2 lessons for the price of one. So again, the screen board. Boy, Tony's doing a great job of mixing the colors together today. I don't suggest you mix the colors unless you're trying to make some kind of an artistic or creative statement, in which case knock yourself out. But if I will perhaps just keep the colors completely segregated. But edging, let's talk about a little bit of edging while I do that. Hopefully the noises don't cover up my voice too badly. Even if you dig a trench in the ground, you dig a hole in the ground, you want to be essentially ground level your patio surface or your pathway surface. I strongly recommend you edge it with something to still contain it, even if it's supposed to look like it's just in the ground. This material is not like concrete. It's not that when the concrete, you pull the forms away from the concrete, it hardens, and you can stand on the edge and jump up and down, and it doesn't do anything. It just stays there. This isn't concrete. Even bonded together, you step on an edge that doesn't have support to the sides of it. I guarantee you it will crumble and crush and not be happy any longer. Really use the edging. What type of edging doesn't matter, but some kind of an edging that will offer support from the sides, because the glue isn't gluing it so that it can only stay together at the sides. It's just bonding the particles so they don't kick around and scuff around so much. Really, that's the purpose of that. Wood is a commonly used edging. It's one of the lesser costly edgings to do. Totally a do-it-yourself thing. I would recommend either using redwood, not the redwood that's red and white. You need Conhard or don't use Concommon, but you need a grade of redwood that has all red, not the red and the white. The white part of the redwood is not particularly decay resistant or resistant to termites and bugs that love to eat wood. The red part is very resistant, but still it's not a permanent material. Pressure treated lumber, regardless of what part of the country or other countries that you're in, if there's pressure treated lumber available that's rated for ground contact. Not all pressure treated wood is created the same. Some are designed that they can be put on the dirt, and other ones are designed that they can be in the air and they will resist, mold and mildew and decay. But if you put them in contact with the dirt, their lifespan is more limited. So you got to be careful what you buy. But those are great materials to use because they're totally do it yourself. If you have any ability to do any kind of carpentry related stuff, you can totally use wood edging. There are different types of wood edging. There's a 2x4. These are 2x6s on the sides. There are landscape timbers that can be like 4" by 6" or a 6" by 8". They used to get called railroad ties, but they're not called that anymore. Bigger, massive blocks of wood, and this partly the look of your design and also your budget. But that gives a totally different look to a space to have the blockier lumber as an edging, for example, than having something narrower like 2x4s and 2x6s. You can do curves with wood, but there's a great deal of work involved in getting a straight board to curve, but it can be done. There's plastic edging of various types, some of which looks like it's made to look like boards. There's one company out here called Benda Board. It's supposed to look like redwood. No, it doesn't look like redwood, but it's kind of redwood-esque. It passes, in the ground, but it's plastic. It's not going to rot or decay. You can bend it, which is very convenient for doing curvilinear pathways or making circles, for example. The cost is not scary. I mean, retail versus, I buy from my wholesaler or whatever, there are different costs, of course, but it's not frightening. Some of these products are made from all or partial recycled content, which is always a good thing. Some of these products are recyclable. If they ever get dug up in the future for some reason, they can be recycled again, which is great as far as planet Earth is concerned. Let's see, those are easy peasy, totally do it yourself. Would be the plastic edging. A plastic edging is supposed to look like lumber. There are other types of plastic edging that are much thinner. Usually they're black in color, but I've seen other colors available. Most of them tend to be about a 1/4 inch thick. And if you're familiar with the term of bender board, there used to be flexible boards that were, 1/4 inch thick or 3/8 of an inch thick. At least in California, they were made of redwood. You can still get it, but it's not as common. But it flexes like that. You can make them straight lines by anchoring them to the ground at very near intervals. They have like spikes that will drive into the ground to hold it steady, or you can put the spikes farther apart and bend the things. It's great for bends. And I use that a lot for lawn edging as well. One of the benefits of that narrower edging, specifically plastic, I'll get on that in a moment, is that In the ground, it can look not necessarily invisible, but it's not a big high profile edging. This stuff, and you got it in your yard, even if it was a different color and more brown, you're gonna see it, you're gonna see that edging. And that's back to the design of your garden. Well, what's it gonna look like? You know, it has to function, you want it to be cost effective, you want it to endure. It's supposed to look good too, and part of your design may not have, you want to see the edging, and almost like the edging stands out more than the stuff it's containing. So that's something to consider. The flexible plastic edgings, there's also aluminum edging and steel edging that are also very narrow in profile that can be used for the same purpose, and they can also be made into curves. And when it's in the ground, it's mostly invisible. For a sod lawn, I guarantee you it's invisible when the grass growing and the grass blades hang over the edge. You just don't see it, but it keeps it all where it's supposed to be and keeps it together. And that's the goal here, is to keep it all together, keep it where it belongs, not where it doesn't belong. And you don't want it to fail and come apart later on down the road. You see, I'm cheating and stealing some from here, robbing Peter to pay Paul to have a low spot. So I'm just building up a little more, so I don't have to get up with a shovel and get more. Hopefully not anyway. Again, doing different colors adjacent to one another, you're gonna have to contend with the stuff overflowing the edges. I don't know, I've probably done a project, a theater project, where there are multiple colors all right next to each other. It's not a common thing to do. So you're seeing some of the pitfalls of having two colors right next to each other. So just bear with me. Anyway, I can see I'm dragging along here. I see a low spot just developed there. So I'm gonna steal some of this high spot, and if I'm lucky, I'll just work it out perfectly. If not, we'll go get some more. Because as Tony suggested, always have a little bit of extra on there. And this is partially why, this kind of stuff. Now also, after you tamp, it may be possible that one area has tamp lower than another area. It may not be perfect. You may need to go back through and put a little bit more. Now, yes, this is the product that Lingso, well, presumably Lingso has mixed the binding agent into that powder. It's like, well, if I tamp it all down, now what do I do? Well, if you have more of the same product, you go ahead and put right on top of it, put it right on top, tamp it down again, screen it out, and do all that stuff and get it to your satisfaction. And then once it's all been tamped, water it in. It doesn't care that you had to put a thinner layer on top. It'll still just work just fine. And it looks like I'm gonna look out that this is gonna have just enough PG in here. Out of sheer laziness, I am going to just scoot this stuff over into here because Lingso is not concerned about mixing these materials in such small amounts. It's not gonna harm anything. So that's what I'm gonna do. Lingso doesn't sell contaminated materials or anything like that. It's more a matter of what do we do with all this stuff. It's all, you know, it's all been put in close proximity. And they're not overly worried about a huge amount of base rock that has a little teeny tiny stuff in it. That isn't going to create a problem or cause any cause for concern. But they only sell quality products, so I've never done business with them. Now I've been doing business with Lingso for 43 years now. So they must be doing something right. And I'm doing something right by shopping here. I don't give a lot of Lingso plugs, but I have full faith and confidence in them, and so should you. But that having been said, okay, that's it all straight down now. I'm gonna end up ultimately, I'm gonna put out every color so you can see all the colors, but I'm accelerating into some of the nuts and bolts that are important to not miss. So, but before I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna tell you about some more edging options. This is back to Tony, the landscape designer, talking, and presumably you're your own landscape designer. If you are, think about what it's gonna look like. Think outside the box. Back in the days of the San Francisco Flower Garden Show that I used to do forever, that was the whole thing. It's highly competitive. The top designers, as a top gun of landscape design, we had to think outside the box, or pale by comparison to our competitors, frankly. So be creative, be ingenious. Think of stuff think of what you like first and foremost. Other than that, your design, purpose and why are you doing that design and what the theme is important regarding your edging choice. Not just edging for this. It could be edging for a lawn or for a flower bed or whatever. Think outside the box. Brick, you can use concrete as in poured concrete. You can pour it, you can texture it, you can color it. You can make it any shape or size or direction or curve you want with concrete, of course. There are machines that will make curbs, so to speak, out of asphalt, but you could edge it all with asphalt. I don't know as a designer if I'd really be happy with that, but you could do it. Take bricks, you can stick bricks on end, one after the other. You can take flagstone products and put them on end. One after the other. That would be different workshops, how to actually install such things, but from a design standpoint, they are all viable candidates to consider. The flagstone comes in a myriad of colors. Again, back to your design and how pretty is it supposed to be? Is it supposed to match the house or contrast with the house or go with the red roses? So of course bricks, or whatever. You can all think of weird totally outside the box. I did a garden easily 30 years ago, where the clients, let's just say the clients drank a lot. They had thousands of empty champagne bottles. I mean, thousands of them gently all stacked up out in the yard. And we ended up burying the champagne bottles nose down, so the big end is facing up, and we edged everything with champagne bottles. It was the first time I've ever done that, and yes, it's glass, you have to be careful, but trust me, the tamping thing, we didn't use a bike blade, everything got hand tamped, but they were only walkways, not a great big patio. But the hand tamping, I actually ended up using essentially a hammer. I have if I have it right at the moment, but I use my mason's hammer. It looks like a pickaxe kind of with a chisel blade on one end and a hammerhead on the other. But the chisel blade is about an inch wide, and I was in there around the bottles, tamping it all down around the curve of each bottle. It was a pain in the neck to do it, but we didn't break any of the bottles. The bottles have lasted. The clients still love it. It's still there. You know, you can think outside the box. You could do clay tiles, standing up vertically or whatever. Anyway, the end is, there is no limit to your creativity. You may be able to find materials that you can recycle. Broken up chunks of concrete, like old sidewalks or whatever. You could conceivably use materials like that. I wouldn't use great big chunks, but you could perhaps do smaller chunks. There are ways to think outside the box and be creative, and perhaps help save the planet or save yourself some money. If you have some kind of material laying around, you have no idea what to do with it. But again, just the wood, you have to be careful. A lot of types of wood decay. Other than that, I'd say knock the brains out, doing some cool stuff that nobody else has done. But when you've done things that are commonly done, or it's a one of a kind, still, I want you to be able to do it safely, properly, and I like it to endure for you, so you can enjoy it for quite a long time. And then those who inherit your house can enjoy it, and so on and so forth. That's the goal. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at about edging. The edging should go, in my opinion, whatever depth of all your material that you're bringing in. So you have your base rock underneath, you have your DG underneath, you have all that stuff that's not visible to the naked eye, it's all underneath. I really recommend that whatever edging material you use that's supposed to stabilize all this goes all the way down to the bottom of all of it, like all the way down to where the cloth is, basically. If you don't and you stop higher up, there's on paper, in theory, your base is supposed to be the foundation of all of this. If it's not supported on its sides all the way down, in theory, could maybe shift or move or settle or something. I've never actually witnessed a failure because of that, but on paper it could. And I'm not willing to take that chance on my clients' jobs. The amount of difference in cost of having the board edging go all the way down or use a 2x4 instead of the 2x6 is worth spending several extra dollars to go all the way down. And the champagne bottles, for example, they're this tall. It wasn't really an issue. And actually, between the necks of the bottles, we mortared in between the bottles underground to make it a solid barrier. And there's no engineering to that. I don't think any engineers would have ever even heard of such a thing. But we had to do something to get it so that where the necks of the bottles were in that open space, still supported the stone underneath. So we really, really buttered it up with an awful lot of mortar in between. And I've been to that job, I don't know, 10 years after it went in. And after I just scraped it on one side, I scraped it on one side, everything looked fine. I mean, yes, they were a total experiment, but it seemed to work. I don't experiment on clients' jobs without their permission first and then knowing that we're doing something that's never been tried. Would you like to try it? And occasionally I get clients that say yes, and they were one of them. So all this stuff is heavy. Like I said before, really give that a great deal of respect. One of the tools I want to show you that I didn't use today, you might, if you're doing a patio or a big walkway or whatever, or any kind of a walkway, rakes. The flat shovel is essential. Just buy one. Don't even try to find a place that'll break or a crappy one that's already been worn down. Sorry for saying that. Your garden variety rake, I see the word garden variety a lot because I work in gardens. This is a good thing to have for generally moving material around. I'm actually going to show you a thing because I apparently have time still. This is just base rock still, base rock with stakes in it. You see there are the chunks, the broken up pieces of concrete, and all this other stuff is the dust and the sand. The concrete is, gravel, sand, and Portland cement. And all this stuff is the Portland cement crushed up and the sand. So they're different products. If you go and rake your whole patio out and you use the tooth end to rake everything, ultimately at the end, you get all the fine stuff in the sand is over here, and you end up with all the rocks at the other end. And base rock is really happier functioning for the purpose for which it was intended, still having a mixture of the fine material and the chunks all together. So just be mindful, if you do a lot of raking, you're gonna end up with rocks, and you need to do something with those, either pour some other base rock that has the fines in there and try to reblend it, or try to use the back of your rake a little bit more, and it tends to drag the fine material also, or a hybrid of both techniques. But if you just use the teeth, you're gonna end up with a whole bunch of rocks, and that's not the way that you really want to do it. It's not gonna create a spot that's guaranteed to fail, but the integrity of how solid is your foundation is technically different there, and less than ideal in my opinion. This is called a grading rake. These things are great for using in your yard and doing TG patios and pathways, or even if you're using a artificial turf, for example, raking out the layers of material that go underneath it. It's a great thing to have. This is aluminum, so it's not as heavy as it might look. Companies that do paving jobs like asphalt paving, I've seen them using rakes that are a variety of this. How they keep the asphalt from sticking all over it, I have no idea. But this is same version as what you saw before. However, you're doing a much larger area in a couple of strokes. It's really much more practical. This is too small to show you how it works, but you see, I've been using the screed board. It's very straightforward. And what happens when you drag that straight board across? Everything is relatively even and nice and smooth, and doesn't have hills and valleys and humps and bumps and all that kind of stuff. We have a screed board built into our back of our rake, and I use that a lot for fine grading lawns or anything else, getting the dirt just right. And when you're dragging it along, you can see, like on this one, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there's a high spot here, and in the middle. There's a low spot. I can clearly see that because it's like having a screed board. You can rake around and fill in the low and high spots and keep working it until it's relatively uniform and happy and nice. There are other ways to accomplish this effect, and I'll get into that in just a second because I have just a second. But this is a great rake to have. Anytime you do raking of an area for your GG or your base rock or whatever, don't just go in one direction with it. Turn and go perpendicular to what you just did, or go from different angles, but don't just do it all in one direction, because what you end up with is a surface that looks pretty darn good in one direction, but you have high spots and low spots in the other direction, because you're only screening it one way, not the other way. I guarantee you, when you're getting it all perfect for one way, you're creating highs and lows in the other. You have to go from other directions to get to kind of average out and be right. Otherwise, it's not going to be right, and you will be an unhappy camper. But at least now you can't blame it on me because you've been warned. Always rake in different directions other than just one. Even the turning around going backwards is good, but not as good as perpendicular or out of slant. You gotta do it. Even if you're just doing a sod lawn or whatever, to get a proper raking job that's as even as possible, always rake in more than one direction. I would recommend buying this thing. Again, I don't remember what I paid for it, but it was like 60 or 70 bucks or something a number of years ago. But I think it's worth the investment you have. Just as a plain old rake, these things are great. You got a big old dirt or whatever dragging around. These teeth grab the dirt and just pull it. And yes, dirt is heavy, but this makes it easier than it looks like it should be for some strange reason. It's also good for raking up like weeds and junk or whatever that are loose in the ground. These teeth just get caught up in all the junk. So it's a good tool to have. So I highly recommend it. All right, I gotta keep getting these things going along here. I'm never gonna be able to show you the other colors, and we don't want to do that. The hosing down thing, I explained that this has the powder mixed into it already. We would just hose it, so we can't take it any longer, but not to the point of that it'll look like colored water. That colored water trying to come out and go over the edges onto some other surface. Don't let it do that. If it does go onto another surface, I suggest to clean it up right now. For fear of potentially creating, discoloration or hazing or something. That would be something you really don't want to have if you're going to win. Okay, let's look at this and see what we got to do to make this one viable. We need to keep moving along. We need a little more base rock. What we need. Fortunately, the kind folks at Lingso gave me more base rock, and it's right over here. They didn't give me the shovel, but at least they gave me the base rock. Wait a minute, did I use all the base rock?
I think.
Oh, holy smokes. That was just before the workshop. I did use all the base rock. Uh-oh. Well, let's see what happens. If we don't have enough base rock in here, I'm going to cheat, just put thicker DG. Don't do this at home.
So Tony, we have like maybe about 20 something.
Okay, we're good. Thank you. No, I appreciate the time check. I will have just enough time to show you pretty much all of that. Oh, here's the thing I completely forgot, and Ken is probably even saddened by the fact that Then I have bonus material, and I always do in my workshop that I failed to do. Let's see. How about a snake slithers into a bar? Bartender says, I can't serve you. Snake says, why not? Bartender says, because you can't hold your liquor. Yeah, all right. How about Charles Dickens walks into a bar and orders a martini. The bartender says, Oliver Twist. Yeah, you have to understand, I have to entertain myself when I'm not working in somebody's yard all day long. And this is the way I entertain myself, apparently. But most of the staff at Linkso, I'm famous for my walk into a bar jokes, even though most of them have heard the jokes more than once. I'm hopeful that you all have only heard them this one time. I'm just cheating right now to sort of get a little bit pushed around and see, do I have enough base rock or not? Yeah, I'm not doing it. Yeah. This is my cheating again, the streeting the base rock to the right height. And as I said, right now I was shooting for having the base rock about 3/4 of an inch below top of my edging. So when it's all packed down, it will hopefully be about 1.5 inches below the top of the edging. That's the goal here. When one doesn't have enough material, of course, you have to be a little more flexible or tolerant of the fact that you may not exactly get what you were looking for. So I'm just going to speed, for the sake of speed, we're actually working out pretty good. I could keep on telling you a joke, but that's not why we're having this workshop. So I'll tell you something later if you're good and you pay attention. Really, I'm not using my gloves because I get a better feel for what I'm doing without the gloves, but it's total cheating. And really, please use the gloves, save your skin. None of this is toxic or anything. The concrete actually that dries, the crushed up concrete has is particularly alkaline and it dries the heck out of your skin. It's not easy to clean. But I have man hands, I don't have sexy soft girl hands or anything, so I don't need to worry about that. But still, it will dry out your hands big time. So make sure you have some lubriderm or something later on, you'll need it. What I'm doing here is just filling in the edge that completely disappeared, and I'll fill that up with extra PG. And in very short time, you're going to have 4 different colors of PG to look at right here, live and in person. But I do need to stamp this down first, quickly, within my 12 minutes or whatever it is I have. I like the blue DG, frankly, as the colors go. Partly because it's 2 colors, depending on wet or dry. But I'm also favorable to the color blue anyway. The golden colors are very, very popular. There's no one that's better than the other. One thing I will say about the gold DG product in my experience is that depending on where you get it from, it may have more than just decomposed granite, the crushed stone in it. It may have a clay content, like clay soil. Some suppliers have sources that I am less pleased with than others. And I'm not bad about any one supplier, but I'm just saying that you can get varying amounts of clay in your gold product. And Linkso sells a good product that I've always been very happy with. Not the reason I stick with them, everything they do is good, but just FYI, that you can get a product that has an awful lot of clay in it, perhaps, and that's less than desirable. It's not going to turn into mud when it gets wet or anything, but it's less than desirable than having a lesser clay content. Linkso could probably talk more intelligently about how much clay is in their product or not. Clay is part of the mix, but excessive clay is a problem. So you've been warned, another thing I've warned you about. I'm again cheating in the interest of time, I'm not camping as much as I should. But the way I'm camping and why I'm camping, where and how, those are the things I want you to watch. As opposed to did he do enough right now because he's just trying to scramble to get everything done in time before he runs out of time. But it's all the same, you're seeing, the repetition of the same thing. None of this is rocket science. Hopefully, despite the fact I talk 1,000,000 miles an hour, I've shared a couple of things I've learned over the years just from having done this forever. And that's what I'm trying to impart to you right now, some of the knowledge, some of the tricks of the trade or things to watch out for that you may not otherwise get warned about. You're gonna do a DG patio or even a walkway. Think about your future garden as a landscape designer. Are you gonna have pipes or wires that need to go underneath it? If you are going to do that, or if it could ever happen, ever, please, before you build all this stuff, tunnel underneath and put in 3 or 4 inch diameter plastic drain pipes. Just like you go to Home Depot or wherever, you get plastic drain pipes. Put them down in there, tape up the ends so that they keep the dirt out of the pipes. They're called sleeves. They allow you access later to go under your patio and put a sprinkler pipe or put lighting wires or put whatever you want, but you don't have to tunnel or trench or dig anymore. It's all ready to go. Put them in spots that you think are the most logical places to have them, and then put them in a couple of other spots that you're not sure if you ever might need it or not, because God help the person who didn't put the sleeve and has to go dig up all that stuff that they did. There's a few bucks worth of pipe, really, put the sleeves underneath, it'll save you a world of headache. Otherwise, I've had horror stories on jobs where the sleeves weren't put in before I got there. It can cost a fortune to fix things like that. But it's cheap and easy and quick to avoid the problem. But you do have to think about the future of your garden, not just the here and now. Well, I'm putting a patio right now, everything else we'll worry about. Well, everything else you may be worrying an awful lot if you didn't anticipate the other things that may happen in that part of your yard later. Okay, then we're gonna do tapping next. No particular reason. This isn't a salt water variety. If you use that, the answer would be horrific. No, let's not do that. It does come in festive color. Still, I caution you. Oh, man, 100-pound bags. So we've got the gold. Some places will call it desert gold. Is it desert gold here, Ken? The gold teacher, they call it desert gold?
It's called Sunset Gold Pathfind.
Oh, there you go, sunset gold. Okay, this is taffy. You'll notice that it is in different colors.
So I think that is the true decomposed granite there. So that is the gold granite, and the rest are, for example, like the blue fines are sandstones, taffy's another sandstone, and the black basalt is a basalt.
There you go.
That one, the Sunset Gold Pathfind, is
Actual granite.
gold granite fines, yeah.
There you go.
So decomposed granite versus pathway fines, it's like, you know,
Oh,
everybody calls all the pathway fines decomposed granite.
I call it DG, yeah.
Yeah, so it's okay.
No, you heard it from the source. That this is actually granite, and the other stuff not percent. But yes, I'm guilty. Well, every one of my competitors, we're all my peers, we all call it.
That's a commonly used term.
Yep.
DG.
No, you're absolutely right for making that distinction, and I'm glad that you did. Now, of course, you know, the pathway fine product, depending on where you are in the country or in another country, may be completely different source material. I can't comment because I've never landscaped anywhere different. If you live in Hawaii and want somebody to landscape in Hawaii, I'm the guy to call, but I've not done it there yet.
You know, their DG or pathway fines is a lot different color than the ones that we have here.
No doubt.
It's like more reddish.
I didn't know that. Oh.
Interesting color.
Okay, I'm just ripping this off the side because we gotta save some time here. But yeah, the color choices where you live may not be the same colors we've got here. I'm just trying to show you that you can achieve different effects by picking different colors. Sometimes that's beneficial, sometimes it ends up looking kind of crazy, more like a patchwork quilt perhaps. But you know, kind of it is what it is. Where did I put my screen? Right behind me. Okay. Again, quickly screening to get this nice and smooth and even across the top again. Now, I don't know if all of you have disappeared or all of you are just very, very paying attention and don't have any questions, and that's fine. You don't have to have questions. As long as you learn, you know, that's my goal here is that you get some information that you can make of use to guarantee your successful project, I should say. And that's the goal here. And if you do have questions, feel free to shut up. I like crazy questions or creative questions the most, but I'll take anything if you have them. If not, I'm gonna keep on working so I can show you, what is this guy talking about anyway? And that's kind of cool. Okay, the taffy fines. Let me know when I have 5 minutes, please, if you can do that. Was already there.
You've got 10.
Okay, no, thank you. No, that's good. I can live with that. Nice. Well, earlier I said if you have teenagers, you know, teenage sons that owe you favors or whatever, if they're football players, they do this stuff with their eyes closed. But otherwise lifting, yeah, they can hurt themselves. You really have to be careful who you delegate to do this kind of stuff. This is crushed black basalt. It doesn't look like from your way, see? Actually, when it's black, I really love that color. I don't know a way to keep it black looking, unfortunately. Okay.
Tony, here's a question for you. Maybe you could.
Sure.
Pros and cons of stabilizer, and what do you recommend? Do you like working with stabilizer, or do you rather keep stabilizer out and just do a pathway find without it?
That qualifies as a very good question. Thank you very much, whoever you are. It's back to the landscape designer. What are the uses of the area going to be? Partially, well, we're gonna put some tables and chairs and everything when the family comes over. Okay, great. The consistency of the family, is it kids running around all the time, or adults that mostly, sit and enjoy themselves more so than running around on the surface? The reason I ask this is the wear and tear the surface is gonna receive. It's gonna be the dog area. The dog's gonna run around all the time. That's a different kind of wear and tear than just people on it. It'll save you some bucks to not bother using a stabilizer. Typical patio, you don't really need it. High use area, I would use it. The stabilizer, or I call it bonding agent, but same difference. The grit, this is a very gritty material. By gluing it together, it helps you keep it together a little bit more so. Otherwise, unstabilized in use, and just with weather and even wind and rain and whatever, the grit works its way up more. If it's stabilized, the grit tends to stay put more. It's not gonna be as hard as a concrete surface when you stabilize it and it dries and it's all finished and ready to go, but it's pretty darn firm. You can run your hand over it or whatever. You could take a stick and you could do whatever. Say, wow, that is kind of solid. It does keep things down together and make less of a mess. Still, all it takes is one piece of this grit in your shoe on your hardwood floor. Still, those same cautions will exist even with stabilizer. I told you already, rainproofing it. The stabilizer doesn't solve the problem. If there's erosion that's going to happen, it'll slow it down with the stabilizer. But once it gets going in there, and you get a carve going, a gully getting carved through it, it's only going to get worse. That's back to, you shouldn't have put that type of a pathway there or a patio there, or should have somehow made it that it slope so much the water isn't running across the surface. Bottom line, the average job, if it's flat, isn't getting high use. They don't have a dog that's going to be running around with his claws all over the place. You don't have to put the stabilizer at all. It's okay, but the gritty surface will be gritty. That's the bottom line of it. It's not scary expensive if you put the product on. Oh, geez, the liquid stone stabilizer. There's a liquid one that you spray on with a garden sprayer. I was going to show you all that. Actually, I got the garden sprayer, so I'll show you. But geez. Okay, well, here's the deal. I'm going to cheat a little bit on the black basalt and not necessarily finish it all, but I want you to see the color and the different texture. The black basalt, when it's crushed, the grit that I was telling you about, the chunks, this has far fewer chunks. It's far finer material. It's not, it's fine as sand or anything. It's not, like gravel or anything, but it doesn't have lots of chunks compared to these other materials. And that's can weigh into your design choice, the look of it, the feel of it. Again, the stabilizer thing. Here's the deal. I say the stabilizer helps to hold the chunks and all that, but the reality is when it's all fine material, it's like 1.5 inches of dust, sort of kind of. I would suggest a stabilizer just to try to help make it a little bit more cohesive, a little bit more of a solid single unit instead of 23 billion little teeny tiny bits of dust that are all trying to coexist peacefully. So there's a distinct difference between this product and the others that all do have a lot of grit and chunks in it. All right, my sprayer. My sprayer. Whoa. If you can avoid tripping on things, it's probably advisable to do so. But that's what happens when I'm not paying attention. Okay, I have an old liquid stabilizer in my sprayer. Here's the deal. Get a garden sprayer, you got a Home Depot and buy one for 15 bucks or whatever, worst case scenario. Doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be special. With the pre-mixed powder in your DG, you roll it all out, you tamp it all out, then you water it. Unfortunately, for this product, well, it's sort of unfortunate. You spray it all on. You spray it on the surface. You don't want to get it all over your edging or your driveway or your whatever. In fact, I did have a job where it did get on the driveway. There was a pain in the neck removing it from the driveway. So be careful about that. But I'm not going to do all of it. I'm just showing you the general idea. Also notice that how dark this material gets when it's wet. This is the blue fines. And I think it's a better color when it's dark, but it's not going to stay on it. But you spray it all out there. As far as how much do we use, Tony? Good question. As a rule of thumb, I would generally say 1 gallon of this product would cover I would say 10 to 12 square feet. The book says up to 15 potentially, but a little bit of extra of this material in your patio, your pathway isn't going to do it any harm. And I think a little bit of extra is actually a good thing. Don't go and double or triple how much you put. It doesn't make it even better and better and better at that point. But yeah, but a gallon, I would say 10 square feet to a gallon is a good rule of thumb. And this right now is only 6 square feet, and I'm not going to spray it all out, but you get the general idea. Now, once you spray it all out evenly, you don't want to have puddles and other areas that aren't puddles. You want to get it as uniform and evenly distributed as you can. Also, you have a big pathway and you got to do 10 square feet to a gallon. Put some flags in the ground along your pathway. Measure out how big is 10 square feet. If your pathway is 4 feet wide and it's 2.5 feet long of it, there's your 10 square feet. But mark out an area that's 10 square feet. Fill up your 1 gallon sprayer. You spray it all out. You've got the right amount of material for that area. You just lather, rinse, repeat. Because otherwise, you can end up putting a heavy dose in spots and a light dose in others. And that's not the best way to do it. You want it to be as uniform as possible to achieve the effect that the inventors of this product had intended. You need to tamp this. Again, any of the means of tamping will all work. Here's a trick that I learned. It's a real pain in the neck, and I actually forgot to bring it with me, but I'm going to use this because it's so small here. After you spray all that product on there, sometimes you'll see it looks like it's like, wow, it's a little wet looking. You might need to wait a short period of time, maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes. Probably depends if it's 110 in the shade or if you're in the sun, frankly. But you might need to wait because when you go to tamp it all, because this hasn't been tamped, you got to tamp it all just like you tamp it just like you would ordinarily tamp it. With the roller, you roll it. With the vibe plate, you vibe plate it. With the roller, I discovered that oftentimes you're rolling along merrily tamping it, and all of a sudden you get some of it that sticks to the roller. Guess what? You just created a problem. Seriously, what you do is reverse the roller right back over the spot where it was, and you're scraping the stuff off to fall back into the area. I would take a wet rag or whatever and gently wipe off the roller and try again and to get it right. And then check and see, does it need a little more DG in there? Put a little bit more DG, spray a little bit more of the spray, frankly. But sticking to your tamping device, even with the hand tamper, oftentimes I'll go, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 square feet, whatever, check it. And do I have stuff sticking to it? Like right now, there's only one little pebble. But if stuff is sticking to it, again, take a wet rag or something, get it clean. Because once it starts sticking, you're just erasing everything that you're about to go and tamp. Really bad idea. It drives me crazy. This is a great product, but it drives me crazy with the tamping part of it and sticking sometimes. So you've been warned, but it really is a great product. I have no problems with either of these products. If you're considering both of them, I would say go to the websites where then the links can provide you all that information. Do your own due diligence and research. You might want to price shop and compare, not from what other companies are links on, but the powder versus the liquid. And decide for yourself which one's better. The end result is they both work well. And if you need a stabilizer, you're not going to hurt yourself by doing either of these products. They're both very good. The more convenient one really is the other one. Tamp it out first and then roll it and then hose it down. You're done. You don't have to worry about sticking. So that's something to consider. But the reality of it is, if you don't have a high traffic area, the question regarding use it or don't use it. If you don't have a high traffic area and we're not going to be concerned about water flowing over the surface of it, draining across it or anything per se. And you don't have it right next to the house, you're going to be tracking up big chunks of lie into your house. You can get away without using the stabilizer, but do for yourself. You know your budget, you know how big your project will be, and if the dollars will allow you to do it, it's not going to do you any harm to put it on there. It's a little bit of an insurance policy to help bind things together and make the surface a little bit less loose grit on it. Over time, a loose grit will still come up, but it is less gritty with the stabilizer. So factor in for yourself. If the budget's a problem, then cut the stabilizer and do it without. But you've been warned about the things that could happen. There's no right or wrong answer to it. But if I was designing a project with you, I'd advise you exactly what you should do or not. But you're the designer theoretically, and I've given you the pitfalls to look out for and the benefits and disadvantages, hopefully, of the stabilizing products. A lot of times the decision really is to go a real tight budget is saving a few bucks by not using it. Putting it on after the fact, not so much really, even if you use a spray on, because if you tamped it already, the spray on can't adequately soak in to bond everything, because it's all, it's a harder patched together surface. That's why you have to pack it afterwards, so that the spray actually has a chance to work its way down the inside. Otherwise, you just spray the surface and everything underneath is still loose and dry. And that's the reason for having to tamp it afterwards, but it can drive you crazy with the sticking to your tamping device. So there you have it with that one. You notice the black basalt, the real dark is already dried up, and this will do the same thing after a while, but since I sprayed, it's gonna take longer. All these materials will darken to some degree when you dampen them, just like your sidewalk is darker when you water it. It'll all lighten right back up again. Putting excessive stabilizer does not maintain the dark color. I know there are various types of sealer products to put on stone and tile and patios and whatever, wet look and all those kinds of things that can alter the appearance of the material. But in my experience, I haven't found anything that really alters the appearance of the DG or pathway fines to the point of making it look always wet. And even if you did have a product like that, I'd be leery about what kind of a lifespan it has and how effective is it really over time. And I just don't know, I'm kind of skeptic about that. But where you live, you may actually have a stone product or a pathway fine product that has a color that comes out darker. Most of these tend to lighten up, is what I'm trying to say, as you can see. Dark pathway products, even a black one turns gray. There used to be one that was a beautiful shade of kind of purplish pink that Linkso used to sell. It's scary expensive, and Linkso isn't just stock it as a regular item anymore, because frankly, most budgets just say, no, we're not going to use that product. But boy, it was in a cool product. This purplish pink or whatever, when you watered it down, it really, it was amazing stuff. But frighteningly expensive, unfortunately. So maybe where you live, there's a quarry that has that stuff, and off you go. I don't know. If you live in the Bay Area, no, not so much. The edging thing, again, be creative with the edging. And the biggest takeaway I can give for you regarding all this otherwise is, okay, what is it? It's a bear walks into a bar, goes up to the bar, says, give me a gin and tonic. Bartender says, why the big pause? Well, I think it's fun. You're the designer, be creative. Don't be afraid to take risks, design wise, but think them through. Think them through. How practical are they? How expensive will they be? Will they endure? And no matter what you do, it's the prep underneath, like sanding and scraping your house before you paint it. It's what's underneath that you never see, that's below ground, that's going to be the key to, it's going to be a complete failure, or generally make you very happy with minimal upkeep. Maintaining the thing, you can blow and blow leaves off, but the grit you may blow off with it. You can rake, you can sweep, but again, it's a loose material. You will lose that material maintaining your patio potentially, or a pathway. That's just the way that it is. Be gentle with a blower if you use a blower, and the leaves might blow off, and most of the other stuff might stay put, but you've got to be careful. The typical gardener doesn't usually exert that much care in what they're doing. No offense to those gardeners, but otherwise there is no maintenance really. I don't know what happens if you spill a bottle of red wine on the gold colored ones. I've never had it happen. The stabilizer isn't a sealer, it's a stabilizer. It just glues it together. It doesn't make it impervious to things being spilled on it. So you know, FYI. You can maintain the whole thing by roughing it all up with the rakes, and especially with the spray-on product. Or both, you can rough it all up with the rake, tamp it all back down again, so supplement it if it's going down in a low spot somewhere, and you could seal it all back up again. So you can reconstitute it. Back in the day, the one with the powder mixed in, you had to destroy it and just remove it and replace it. But since then, the technology evolved that it can now be repaired by just busting it all up again until it's loose and soft in small pieces, and redo it just like it's regular DG. And presumably have to go and buy a little bit more supplement. But it can be fixed, which is good news. Except for my client, that they have the old style stuff that we have to destroy a section of it and just put the new stuff in and hope and pray that it's a fairly close color match. I think we'll be okay with that one. Really, I don't have anything else to add. I can tell you more jokes, but Cam's heard them already, and I don't want to bore her to death. And we're probably just about out of time right at the moment. I hope you took notes. If not, you can watch the video later. Play it at a slower speed, and then I talk a little bit more easily to follow, perhaps. I've always talked this way. I'm excited about what I do, and I'm filled with all kinds of information that I try to get out as best I can. I hope you were able to catch some of it. I believe that my contact info will be available somehow, Cam.
Yes.
So if you needed to reach out to me, A, to hire me, or B, to have a question. I can only do so much as far as how much extra, energy I can put into answering questions. If you have a question, I'll even tell you I can't answer your question, but here's a place you might go to find it. I'll give you an answer. But I'm not going to design your yard for free and all that kind of stuff, of course. But I'm happy to help if I can. I may have missed a thing, and if you missed it, if there's something you really needed to know, and I failed to provide that information, I really appreciate if you reach out to me. I won't try to sell you anything, if you like me and you think I know what I'm doing, you're gonna hire me anyway. But meanwhile, I want to thank all of you, whether there's 1 of you or 300 of you, I have no idea. But I want to thank you for taking the time in your afternoon to share it with me, and I hope you learned something. I learned a couple of things today, let me tell you that right now. Like, don't move this whole thing after you've already started building it. It was not the best thing to have done, but we had to. So no lives were lost in the process, though. No animals were harmed in the making of this workshop.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for attending. And obviously this is available on our website, recorded. And thank you so much, Tony.
You're
for
welcome.
another awesome class. And now we get to clean this all up. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Are we done?